They played on family radio. Your parents hummed them in the kitchen. Your teachers put them on during class parties. But beneath those catchy melodies and innocent-sounding choruses lived lyrics that were anything but clean. These are 12 famous songs from the 1980s that people didn't realize were filthy. Let's begin. 12. Head Like a Hole. 9 Inch Nails arrived in 1989 with Pretty Hate Machine, an industrial rock record that sounded like nothing else on radio. Head Like a Hole was its lead single, and while most listeners were drawn in by its aggressive energy and Trent Reznor's ferocious vocal delivery, the lyrics were doing something far more provocative beneath the noise. The title itself was a deliberate double meaning. One interpretation pointing toward greed and submission, the other considerably more explicit. Reznor built the song as an attack on corporate control and moral compromise, but the language he used to make that argument was soaked in sexual imagery that sailed cleanly over the heads of anyone not paying close attention. Radio programmers focused on the industrial sound and missed the content entirely. Head Like a Hole was rage dressed as noise, and the filth was always part of the point. 11. She Bop. Cyndi Lauper spent most of 1984 presenting herself as pop music's most colorful and unthreatening personality. She Bop fit perfectly into that image, a bright and bouncy track with a playful rhythm and a chorus that sounded like pure, innocent fun. It was not. She Bop was an unambiguous celebration of self-pleasure, wrapped so thoroughly in cheerful production and Lauper's characteristically exuberant vocal that the Parents Music Resource Center somehow took several months to notice what the song was actually about. When they did notice, it landed on their infamous Filthy 15 list of songs deemed dangerous for young listeners. Lauper responded with characteristic wit, essentially confirming everything while refusing to apologize for any of it. She Bop was a feminist statement disguised as a pop confection, and the fact that millions of people sang along without realizing what they were celebrating made it even more subversive. 10. Centerfold. My memory has just been sold. My angel is the centerfold. On the surface, Centerfold by the J. Geils Band was a straightforward story about a man who discovers his innocent high school crush in an adult magazine. Wholesome enough, or so it seemed. But beneath that narrative was something considerably more uncomfortable, a detailed fantasy about a man's obsession with a woman reduced entirely to her physical image, framed not as critique, but as celebration. The song reached #1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1982 and stayed there for 6 weeks, becoming one of the year's defining pop moments. Its new wave production and infectious chorus distracted almost everyone from the lyrical content, which upon close examination was far more troubling than nostalgic. Centerfold was the kind of song that sounded innocent precisely because it never acknowledged that it wasn't. And that gap between surface and substance was exactly what made it so fascinating and so revealing about its era. 9. Hot for Teacher. I'm hot for teacher. Van Halen were never a band who traded in subtlety, but Hot for Teacher managed to smuggle its content past a surprising number of listeners who should have known better. The premise was exactly what the title suggested, a student's explicit fantasy about a female teacher, delivered with Eddie Van Halen's most acrobatic guitar work and David Lee Roth's most gleefully unhinged vocal performance. The music video, which featured actual classroom scenes alongside considerably less academic imagery, received heavy rotation on MTV despite content that would raise serious eyebrows by any modern standard. Parents who caught their children watching it often focused on the volume rather than the lyrics. Hot for Teacher was loud enough and fast enough that the specifics blurred into pure energy, which was almost certainly the intention. Van Halen understood that the best way to sneak something past the gatekeepers was to make it impossible to sit still to. If you've been singing along to these songs your whole life without realizing what you were actually saying, Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. There are plenty more where these came from. Let's keep going. 8. Sugar Walls. Sheena Easton had built her career on polished, radio-friendly pop with an impeccably clean image. Sugar Walls shattered that image so completely that it ended up on the Filthy 15 list alongside far more obviously provocative material. Written by Prince under the pseudonym Alexander Nevermind, the song used food and architectural metaphor to describe female sexuality with a directness that left very little to the imagination once you actually listened to what was being said. Easton's crisp, precise vocal delivery made the whole thing sound almost clinical, which somehow made it more startling rather than less. Radio programmers initially missed the content entirely, focusing on the sleek production and Easton's established reputation. By the time the PMCRC drew public attention to the lyrics, the song had already done its damage, reaching number 9 on the Billboard Hot 100 and permanently complicating Easton's carefully maintained public persona. 7. Relax.
Relax, don't do it. When you wanna go to it. Relax, don't do it.
Frankie Goes to Hollywood did not try particularly hard to hide what Relax was about. The lyrics were explicit, the promotional material was explicit, and the band's public statements about the song left nothing to the imagination. What was remarkable was how long it took the gatekeepers to catch up. BBC Radio 1 eventually banned it in January of 1984, a decision that immediately drove it to number 1 in the United Kingdom, where it stayed for 5 weeks. The ban was the making of the song commercially, turning a provocative dance track into a cultural phenomenon. In America, where the lyrics received less scrutiny, it climbed to number 10 on the Billboard Hot 100. Relax was a celebration of gay sexuality at a moment when that celebration carried genuine social risk, and its commercial triumph was as much a political statement as a musical one. The filth, in this case, was entirely the point. 6. Let's talk about sex.
Come on, let's talk about sex, baby. Let's talk about you and me.
Salt and Pepper arrived with a title so direct that most people assumed the song itself must be relatively tame by comparison. They were wrong. Let's Talk About Sex was an explicit, detailed, and unapologetically frank conversation about sexual behavior, protection, and desire that went considerably further than its radio-friendly presentation suggested. Released in 1991, but written and performed squarely in the tradition of the late 1980s hip-hop scene, it reached number 13 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of the most discussed records of its moment. What made it genuinely subversive was its matter-of-fact tone. Salt and Pepper were not being provocative for provocation's sake. They were having a conversation that popular music had consistently avoided, and they were having it loudly and without apology. The song was later adapted into a public health campaign, which suggested that its frankness was always more valuable than its controversy. 5. Kiss.
Kiss.
Prince rarely needed more than a few words to say something that other artists would require entire verses to approach. Kiss was built on almost nothing: a sparse funk groove, a falsetto vocal, and a set of lyrics that described physical desire with a directness that somehow felt more intimate than explicit. Released in 1986, it reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and became one of his most commercially successful singles. The genius of Kiss was its economy. Prince stripped away every element that wasn't essential and left only the desire itself, naked and completely unashamed. Radio programmers heard the minimalist production and Prince's almost whispered delivery and concluded it was safe. It was not safe. It was one of the most sensual records ever made, constructed with such precision and confidence that it made everything around it sound overcomplicated. Prince always understood that what you left out was just as powerful as what you put in. 4. I Want Your Sex. George Michael spent the first half of his career carefully managing a public image built on charm, warmth, and accessibility. I Want Your Sex was his deliberate dismantling of that image, a slow-burning funk record that stated its intentions in the title and then spent 6 minutes making good on the promise. Released in 1987, it was banned by BBC Radio 1 and numerous American radio stations, which naturally ensured that everyone who hadn't already heard it went immediately looking for it. Michael's argument was that the song promoted monogamy rather than promiscuity, a reading that was technically defensible but somewhat beside the point given the explicitness of the surrounding material. It reached number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100, kept from the top only by the band limiting its airplay. I Want Your Sex marked the moment George Michael decided to stop being what the industry wanted and start being exactly who he was. 3. Like a Virgin. Madonna arrived with Like a Virgin in 1984 and immediately demonstrated her extraordinary gift for weaponizing innocence. The title was the joke, and the joke was entirely intentional. The lyrics described physical sensation with enough specificity that the virginity framing was always ironic rather than sincere, a deliberate provocation aimed directly at the cultural gatekeepers who policed female sexuality in popular music. It reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 and stayed there for 6 weeks, becoming one of the defining commercial moments of the decade. Her performance at the inaugural MTV Video Music Awards, rolling across the stage in a wedding dress, made the subversion impossible to ignore for anyone still clinging to the innocent reading. Madonna understood that the most powerful way to challenge a cultural boundary was to appear to respect it while demolishing it completely. Like a Virgin was not a love song. It was a declaration of intent, dressed in white lace. 2. Physical.
I wanna get physical. Let's get into physical.
Olivia Newton-John had spent her entire career as one of popular music's most wholesome and carefully managed presences. Physics changed everything, and did so with a cheerfulness that made the content almost impossible to object to directly. Released in 1981, the song spent 10 consecutive weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, becoming the biggest hit of the entire decade to that point. Its subject matter was unmistakable. Newton-John was not singing about exercise. The gym metaphors were a thin disguise over lyrics that described physical desire with a frankness entirely at odds with her established image. Several radio stations refused to play it. Others played it constantly. The music video leaned into the fitness framing just enough to give programmers plausible deniability while making the actual meaning impossible to miss. Physical was a masterclass in strategic misdirection, proof that the most effective way to say something scandalous is to smile warmly while you're saying it. 1. My Sharona.
My Sharona.
The knack arrived in 1979 with My Sharona and immediately produced one of the most uncomfortable number 1s in chart history. The song spent 6 weeks at the top of the Billboard Hot 100 and became the best-selling single of 1979, which meant that an enormous portion of the listening public spent an entire summer singing along to lyrics they had not examined closely enough. The object of the narrator's obsession was a real person, Sharona Alperin, who was 17 years old at the time of the song's writing. The lyrics describe that obsession in physical terms that left very little room for innocent interpretation. The knack presented it as pure rock and roll energy, all pounding drums and strangled guitar, and the sheer momentum of the music carried most listeners past the content without pause. My Sharona was irresistible and deeply unsettling in equal measure, which perhaps explains why it has never entirely disappeared from the cultural conversation. Some songs endure because they are great. Some endure because they are complicated. This one managed to be both simultaneously. They were on every radio station, every mixtape, and every school dance playlist, and almost nobody knew what they were actually singing. The 1980s hid its secrets in plain sight, wrapped in synthesizers and shoulder pads. If this opens your eyes, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below. We'll see you in the next one.